Welcome to the latest episode of Star Cells and God. My name is Fuz Rana. I'm a biochemist and a Christian apologist, and I'm joined in studio today by Dr. Hugh Ross, who is an astronomer, a Christian apologist, and the founder of Reasons to Believe, which is the organization that sponsors this program, thanks to the generous gifts and donations of viewers and listeners like you. Today we're going to be talking about two new discoveries that provide evidence for the credibility of the Christian worldview. Hugh's going to be talking about cometary impacts that penetrated the Earth's crust, that paved the way for advanced life and humanity, indicating the careful design of the Earth and Earth's history so that life is possible. And I'm going to be talking about new insights from genetics that indicate that human beings are unique and exceptional, just as the Bible teaches. You don't want to miss this episode. Well, Hugh, welcome to Star Cells and God. It's good to be able to spend some time with you. You've been on the road lately, so I haven't seen you much in the last 10 days or so.
Well, it was a 13-day trip, but the first few days we were together at the Steadfast conference, the board meeting, so it was good.
Well, you've got an interesting discovery, as always, about the history of the Earth and how cometary impacts influence the capacity of the Earth to harbor life. So why don't you take it away?
Well, seems like every month or so there's a new scientific journal being launched. One that was launched just a few years ago is Physical Review Research. And so I've been looking at their issues and a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, it seems like every issue they got a few hundred papers being published. So, but this one caught my attention. And this is the paper right here. And it's basically looking at zircon oxygen-18 isotopes and zircons.
Okay.
And they begin to point out that these, the ratio of oxygen-18 to 17 and 16 actually is a reliable indicator of the depth from which the zircon's been recovered.
Oh, okay.
And so, depending on the oxygen-18 isotope ratio, that tells you that the zircon came from somewhere in the crust or even somewhere in the mantle. So they look at these oxygen-18 isotopes and looking for, dramatic excursions where you see a significant change relative to the norm, indicating that these are events where these zircons come from, the upper mantle of the Earth, and recognizing that this actually correlates, because we can actually date when these excursions took place. And so if you got the dates, you got the excursions, they begin to look, is there an astrophysical cause for this? And so their whole point is that where you see the biggest excursions in the oxygen-18 isotope ratios coincides with when the solar system crosses a spiral arm. And so, and when it crosses a spiral arm, it's going to encounter massive interstellar clouds of gas. And those encounters are going to disturb the Oort Cloud comets. I mean, the biggest population of comets and asteroids in our solar system is in the Oort Cloud. We've only discovered a handful of them because these comets are very far away from the sun. Only our largest telescope, I think Sedna, is really the only clearly identified object we've been able to see. New telescopes will be able to see more, but astronomers estimate that there's at least 2 trillion of these comets in this outer comet belt. It extends out to, about 2 trillion miles from the Earth or from the sun. However, when the solar system encounters one of these big, dense molecular and gas clouds, it gravitationally disturbs the Oort cloud and causes big comets to move into the inner solar system, some of which collide with the Earth. And these zircon isotope ratios are basically telling them some of these comets, when the solar system crossed a major spiral arm, the minor arms not so much, but the big arms they looked at were the Perseus spiral arm and the Scutum-Centaurus spiral arm. So these are the big spiral arms in our galaxy, and this is when we see zircons that come from considerable depth. So it's basically telling us these comets were striking, big comets, striking the Earth. Some of them actually penetrated the Earth's crust, went down on the mantle. Others, they see isotope ratios indicating they hit the crust so hard that it caused that continental plate basically to vibrate up and down, which would disturb the other plates that are around that particular continental plate. Actually got the plates moving. And so they're able to demonstrate that thanks to these big comets hitting the Earth, you get subduction events where one plate goes under another very rapidly, plates moving rapidly with respect to one another, and also explains things like the Great Unconformity, which is a key geological feature in Earth's history, where you got these massive slides of the Earth coming off the continents into the oceans. For example, that's why geologists believe is responsible for the continental shelves off the shores of continents. It was these huge landslides coming off the continents, and correlates with the Avalon explosion of life and the Cambrian explosion of life. Also, these penetration events would cause snowball events and would greatly accelerate the deep oxygen cycle. So this is what I find interesting, is that when we have the solar system crossing the spiral arms is when we see these major events.
And how frequently does that crossing take place?
About once every 190 million years, where it crosses a major spiral arm.
Okay.
So, and they end the paper by saying, basically, we're showing that there's an astrophysical explanation for Earth's geological history. And so they've laid that out, but they conclude the paper saying, we need a lot more study on this.
Yeah.
So they're basically opening up a new discipline, looking at the dynamics of the solar system in the Milky Way galaxy, the feature of the Milky Way galaxy, and trying to tie that in to Earth's geological history. So they kind of opened a door to almost a new scientific discipline, or at least a new scientific subdiscipline, and saying, hey, let's put more funding towards this. This is a fascinating area. They never discussed the design possibilities, which really struck me, is, hey, we've been writing for years about how the snowball events, where Earth is 70 to 85% covered with ice and snow, and how that basically boosts the oxygen in the atmosphere, drops the carbon dioxide down, and dropping the carbon dioxide down is key to compensating for the brightening of the sun. The sun's getting brighter and brighter, but these events pull sufficient carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere that it maintains the surface of the Earth at an optimal temperature for life. And so I don't see any of this as a coincidence. It's like I really see God's hand in orchestrating the dynamics of our Milky Way galaxy and the movement of our solar system. We go around the center of the solar system about once every 250 million years. And so, the region they studied was 190 million years, but there's other parts in the history where you get a different crossing. So they said, hey, don't take all of our stuff as the way it's in. We need a lot more study in this and really figure out in detail what's going on. But what caught my attention is these astrophysical events are crucial to getting enough oxygen in the atmosphere that you can have animals.
Yeah.
And getting that oxygen fast enough that you can get animals as early as just, 575 million years ago or 538 million years ago with respect to the Cambrian explosion. And, getting the Great Unconformity, which again was key to getting the nutrients you need so you can have these animals. It's something you see in Genesis chapter 1, creation day 5. We got God creating these vast swarms of marine animals. But you need a lot of things to happen on the earth in order for that to even be possible. And so I just see these events as making all that take place.
Well, one reason why I think that Genesis 1 has to be divinely inspired is the fact that that it's not until the fifth day of creation that Moses is describing God populating the oceans with
animals,
with life.
Yeah.
Because, when you begin the Genesis 1 account, the earth is a water world.
Yes.
And you would just think intuitively, if you didn't have any understanding whatsoever, that you would just place animals in the waters at that point in time. But it's interesting that it's not until there is, the continents that form and, the atmosphere that undergoes alteration that you see animals created on the fifth day. So it's the events of the third day and the fourth day that are absolutely necessary. And so what you're describing here ties into that, right? Until you get continents and you get the formation of the continental shelf, there's no place really that's shallow water, that's shallow enough in the oceans for animal life to exist, advanced animal life to exist.
Right. Yeah, you need these vast continental shelves where you got shallow marine water, where you got enough oxygen in that marine water and enough nutrients from these landslides that you can have these complex animals living in the oceans. I mean, there are animals that live in the deep ocean, but they're not very complex creatures.
Yeah.
And so this is what makes possible the Avalon. And you're right about Genesis. Up until creation day 4, the atmosphere is a thick haze, and it takes oxygen in the atmosphere to transform that haze where the atmosphere becomes transparent. Yeah. That's creation day 4. Creation day 5, you got God creating the animals. Yeah. This paper is basically saying, hey, several things need to be in place for that to even be possible. And, what caught me in reading this paper, Fuzz, is that this shows just how aggressive God was in getting the planet ready for us human beings. It's like, he, of course, knows everything. He knows the sun is getting brighter and brighter. He knows as the sun gets brighter and brighter, it's also becoming more and more stable in its luminosity. And for humans to be possible, and especially for us humans to launch and establish global civilization, we need to be here when the sun has extreme luminosity stability, and we need to be here when the oxygen's at the level that we need, roughly 20%. And we need to be here when we have all the biodeposits we need to sustain our civilization. And to get that to happen in just 3.8 billion years after God creating the first microbial life on the earth, to me, this is an astounding miracle. Yeah. I mean, everything tells me if you don't have this God miraculously involved, it's not going to happen that fast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting to think that it's essentially cometary impacts that are happening at the just right time that are making all of this possible, because it's counterintuitive, but you can't have advanced animal life in the oceans until you have continents formed.
Right.
That's completely counterintuitive. And it's interesting that these cometary impacts created so much turbulence that it caused the massive movement of material to create the continental shelf.
It's sped up the supercontinent cycle. I mean, that's another incredible miracle. Earth has had 5 supercontinents in its history. And, to have continents coming together to make one continent and split apart, that's a lot of aggressive plate tectonic activity. How do you get that much happening in such a brief history, only a few billion years, while these giant comets impacting the Earth, penetrating the crust, or at least hitting the crust hard enough that the continental plates basically bounce up and down and collide with one another? This is what it takes to get animals as fast as it is, and especially to get us humans. Right. People often don't realize how short a window of time we humans can exist in the history of the solar system. So this is where I see the supernatural hand of God. He's basically speeding everything up, intervening in order to make sure we get here soon enough. Because after all, if it takes another 100 million years, we wouldn't be able to exist here. Yeah. The sun wouldn't be stable enough. The sun would be too hot. We couldn't exist. And so God has this little sliver of time on his calendar. And just like kind of our calendar, this is all I got to do in order to make sure I can function on this particular day.
You know, a number of years ago, I heard you give a really great talk where you describe the anthropic principle inequality. And that seems to me that this is what you're just describing there
Right.
is in that category, right? That it took vast amount of time to prepare the earth so that human life is possible, but it's an extremely narrow window. And it connotes the Creator's deep care for humanity to go through all of that effort and time so that there is this instant where humanity can exist, human beings made in God's image, and not only exist, but exist with abundance of resources so that advanced human civilization is possible. That really, I think, connotes the Creator's care.
Thank you for bringing that up. That anthropic principle inequality is basically the recognition by scientists you can't prepare the terrestrial scene here on Earth for human beings in human civilization in anything less than 4.57 billion years. And that's where we are right now. But the time window in which we can exist in a civilized state is much briefer than 1 million years. Some say it's briefer than 40,000 years if you're talking global civilization. So when you compare that 40,000 years to 4.57 billion years, that's an enormous inequality.
Yeah.
Basically shows, hey, there's got to be a God that's orchestrating everything.
Yeah. Well, you know, in terms of our experience as human beings, right, you know, we do things like we have weddings for our children, right? And the amount of expense and preparation leading up to the day of the wedding is enormous. And it's an hour ceremony, and then,
So 1 year and $20,000 for 1 hour.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the reception that is,
Right.
a few hours afterwards. But we love those people so much that it's worth all that expense for that event to take place for such a short period
And
of
all
time.
that time of preparation.
And so,
Yeah.
in like manner, it just really communicates how much God really loves us, which is the message that we see in Scripture.
Yeah, well, the bottom line of this paper is that it looks like this anthropic principle inequality is more astounding than we had thought.
Yeah.
Trying to get everything set up that fast
Yeah.
is nothing short of miraculous.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's fun, Hugh.
well, tell us about genetics. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I did mention humans here, so hopefully you'll be able to tie that
Yeah.
in.
Well, I mean, what I want to talk about does have to do with the whole idea that human beings really are exceptional, that we really are made in God's image. And I thought, just to have a little bit of fun before I get into the discovery, I used a couple of AIs, Grok and Bard, specifically to come up with a list of 10 things that humans have accomplished that are exceptional. So this is, Grok and Bard's insights, and I kind of combined them. And people may disagree with what's on the list, or they may think other things should be included.
This could be a comedy show, Fuz.
Yeah, well, it's actually not. And there's a larger point that I want to make with this. But for example, landing on the moon in 1969 makes the top of the list.
Okay.
And I would actually think I would agree with that. That's a pretty exceptional accomplishment. Eradicating the smallpox virus in 1980.
Yes.
Sequencing the human genome in 2020 or 2003. I would actually maybe put that ahead of eradicating smallpox, but nitpicking here. The establishment of the internet in the 1990s. Beethoven's Symphony No. 9 made the list
Okay.
in 1824. The invention of the Gutenberg printing press in 1440. The building of the Panama Canal in 1914. Climbing Mount Everest in 1953. Was that Sir Edmund Hillary?
Hillary, yeah.
Yeah, Edmund Hillary. Building the pyramids of Giza in 2630 BC, and then the painting of the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo in the early 1500s. Now, again, people could argue that there are things that should have been included in the list that aren't, but I think the larger point that I'm making here is that humans have accomplished some pretty exceptional things. That involves science and engineering and art and music, right? And the list goes on and on. even in, certain things that involve exploration. There's no other creature that has ever existed, including Neanderthals, that have ever done these types of things. Neanderthals have been on Earth longer, or were on Earth longer than we have been on Earth, and their technology remains static. So I think just on that basis alone, it really does seem like human beings truly are exceptional. So the idea of human exceptionalism, which I think is patently obvious to everybody, is challenged by many anthropologists who argue, look, humans really aren't exceptional. We really aren't unique. We're just different in degree, not kind, from other creatures. That everything that we think is special about us has its antecedents in the hominins that precede us. We're just glorified apes. And so this is, again, an idea that is challenged by some anthropologists. But then on the other hand, there are anthropologists who argue that, wait a minute, humans really are different in kind. We really are unique. And so that is really a debate that's taking place right now, is the question, are humans unique? And if so, what is the basis for that uniqueness? And it's in this context that a team from UC San Diego did a study where they determined that a region of the human genome called HAR123, HAR stands for Human Accelerated Region, actually is unique in humans, and the version in humans is different from that in chimpanzees, and that this particular region plays a role in neurodevelopment and ultimately in cognitive flexibility. And so they argue that this is something that contributes to human uniqueness. And of course, the question is, so what, right? So what if they've discovered this? I think this is the type of study that really provides evidence that, from a scientific perspective, that human beings, again, are unique, that we're able to explain it from a genetic standpoint, which affirms what the Bible teaches about human identity and human nature. That is, that we're uniquely made in God's image. We take a view here at Reasons to Believe that is a structuralist view, or sometimes called the resemblance view, where we argue that the image of God refers to qualities that human beings uniquely possess. And that allows us to be God's representatives here on earth, to carry out the responsibilities that God has given us to multiply and fill the earth, to subdue the earth, to rule over the earth, to be stewards of the planet, and also allows us to enter into a relationship with God uniquely. And so the idea of establishing the image of God is not only important to show the scientific credibility of the human origins creation account, but it's the foundation of the gospel. It's the foundation of Christian ethics.
So tell me, what does this gene HRA123 really do?
Yeah. Well, HAR123 is part of a family of DNA sequences that are found in the human genome that are again called human accelerated regions. And there's about 3,000, 3,100 that have been identified.
And what do they mean by human accelerated regions?
Well, what it means is that these are typically regions that are found in many mammals, in fact, in many instances across all mammals, that are ultra-conserved, which means to a biologist that they must be performing some kind of critical function. Because if they weren't, then it would be easy for those sequences to vary but because they're performing a critical function, natural selection prevents them from accruing any kind of genetic change. But in humans, those same sequences have undergone what appears to be very rapid changes. They're quite different. So the chimpanzee version of HAR123 has 9 nucleotides or 9 genetic letters that are different than the human version.
So this would be true of all the HRA genes where you'd see
Yes.
distinct differences.
Right. So people believe that this collection of 3,000, 3,100 regions is probably critical in terms of establishing our uniqueness as human beings.
There's that many?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Now, people are working on trying to understand what these sequences are doing. About half of them are called enhancer sequences, which means that they are sequences that will regulate gene expression patterns. And it turns out that HAR123 is an enhancer sequence. Now, other HAR sequences are not enhancers, so people are still trying to figure out what these sequences are doing, but there's a lot of interest in understanding these different sequences, and that's a big project when you talk about 3,100 individual regions of the genome to study. But it turns out that HAR1, and let me just refer to my notes here, is located in a gene, if people are keeping score at home, called the SMGG gene, and it's embedded in what's called an intronic sequence, which means it's a sequence that will get spliced out. Once that gene is transcribed into a messenger RNA, there's a mechanism in which these intronic sequences get cut out and the exonic sequences are joined together to produce the mature messenger RNA. So this is found in an intronic sequence in this gene, but it actually influences another gene called, let's see here, it influences another gene called the H1C1, the HIC1 gene.
Which does what?
And that particular gene is playing a role in neural development, in particularly the production of what are called neural progenitor cells. And these are cells that will eventually develop into either neurons or glial cells. Neurons are the cells in the brain and in the nervous system that conduct electrical signals that form the neural networks. But the glial cells are playing a critical role in terms of supporting the neurons or functioning as part of the brain's immune system, things like that. So there's a whole ensemble of glial cells. But it turns out that this is playing a role in again, the production of neuroprogenitor cells. It turns out that the human version of HAR123 actually leads to the production of more neurons than glial cells. So it actually creates skews the production of cells from the neuroprogenitor cells towards the direction of neurons. And it turns out to be active in the midbrain, the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hypothalamus. And through a series of experiments working with mice, where they knocked out the HAR123 region, where they incorporated the chimpanzee version, where they incorporated the human version, they determined that in mice, this is playing a role in cognitive flexibility, which means that you are able to adapt to new situations. Mice that either don't have the HAR123 gene or have the chimpanzee gene version aren't as cognitively flexible, meaning that if you put them in a maze and train them, they learn how to navigate the maze. But if you change one thing, they get stuck. With the human version, these mice are able to adapt to that change and are able to very quickly accommodate that change.
Now, does this gene also explain why the human brain has so many neurons?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
It doesn't in a global sense, but at least with respect to the midbrain, the forebrain, and then the hypothalamus, it's contributing to the neuron glial cell distribution, right? But I don't know that it's the sole determiner of the neuronal density.
If it helps, obviously it's not the soul. I'm just wondering if it plays a role.
Yeah. No, it definitely plays a role. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's the point of this paper, is that that's the key function. So what they've learned is that this very well could explain in part this capacity for humans to have cognitive flexibility, which contributes significantly to our exceptional nature as human beings, which means that at least with respect to chimpanzees, we're unique. Now, I was curious to see what version of HAR123 Neanderthals have. So I did a little bit of work and have been able to discover some papers where people are comparing modern human and Neanderthal HAR sequences, and some of them are ancestral and some of them are shared with modern humans. With regard to HAR123, I couldn't specifically find the answer to that. So that's a project that I'm going to undertake. But again, just for fun, I ask Grok and I ask Bard and I ask another AI, ChatGPT, the answer, is the human version of HAR123 the same as the Neanderthal version, or is the Neanderthal version like the chimpanzee version? And in 2 of the 3 AIs, they said the Neanderthal version is ancestral, meaning it's like that of the chimpanzees. One of them gave an answer that was unintelligible, even though I continued to query it. When I asked for references, the AI wasn't able to give me a specific paper that I could look up, but other than that said you just need to refer to these databases, which I don't have access to. So, some AIs think that the Neanderthal version is like chimpanzees. Others aren't sure.
Well, most AI systems are surveying the papers that you see in the internet. They're really not getting into the scientific literature. So,
yeah. Well, what I did like about Grok is it actually tells you what it's doing where it's searching. And so it was evident that it was actually searching some papers in the scientific literature.
Okay, good.
And when I asked for references, it gave me references into the scientific literature. And those were bona fide references. I've had Grok give me, hallucinate and give me references to the scientific literature that didn't exist, right? But point is, it would be really interesting to see whether or not Neanderthals had the HAR123. So I'm going to continue to explore that question.
With these 3,100 HRA genes, how many have been researched to the degree that we see in this paper?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. People have looked at them globally and have looked for certain characteristics that they all share, and there are a number of them that have been studied, but I couldn't tell you the precise number that have been carefully characterized.
Ballpark, is it less than half or less than 10%?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I don't know I've not spent a lot of time digging into these HAR sequences, but it looks like this is something that's probably worth spending some time delving into just because of the nature of this paper.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, if we're only dealing with a handful of them, it'd be really good to go after all of them.
Yeah, but and the reason why this team went after this is because there's been prior work that suggested that this could be an interesting target that could account for human uniqueness. So there were reasons why they went and studied this in extensive detail. It was, the number of experiments they did was quite extensive.
You wouldn't happen to know how many genes actually play a role in determining how many neurons we have in the brain and where they are?
I don't know the answer to that. It's going to be a very large number.
Yeah. Right. Do you know research groups that are pursuing that?
Excuse me. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there are definitely research groups that are doing that. Part of the challenge is that when you're looking at genes, it's usually a network of genes that are working collaboratively to determine certain biological features. And so each feature is determined by a number of genes, and each gene is involved in determining a number of features. And so genes that are playing a role, let's say, in the production of neuroprogenitor cells, are also going to be playing other roles in the biology of the organism. It's going to be very much tissue dependent. So it's not an easy thing to tease out, how many genes are involved in neural production, right? There's a catalog of genes, and each one is playing a different role or contributing in different ways.
Well, the fact that it's more than a few by itself is significant. So.
Right. But it is true that, the human brain does have a very high degree neuronal density. So we have a very large number of neurons, and the density of the neurons is high. The quality of the neurons is even superior than other animals. And so,
What gets me, Fuzz, looking at that, it's at the limit that the laws of physics will tolerate. I mean, actually pack our brain with more neurons or greater complexity, the brain winds up cooking itself to death.
Yep.
So, this book that Ken and I and Mark are writing on, UAPs and people thinking about these aliens with these giant heads. I mean, we do have the biggest brains that are possible in terms of the neurons. So, but again, all these different genes that are making this happen.
Yeah.
So, any idea of how many neurons we have in our brain, or the kinds of neurons we have compared to Neanderthals? Do you have a guesstimate on that?
Yeah, I don't know how many neurons Neanderthals had, but we have, gosh, is it, well, there's something like 80 million connections. I don't know the number of neurons, but I think the estimates are somewhere between 80 to 100 million neuronal connections in the brain, something like that.
I've even heard as high as 1 trillion, but maybe that's...
Oh, maybe it's 80 to 100 billion connections.
Yeah.
Not million, but billion connections, So it's in the billions. Yeah, and there's a great episode, if people are interested, where I interviewed Uditha Jaratanga, who is specializes in neurorehabilitation in the UK. He's a physician, and it's just about the amazing brain, and that was some of the things that we talked about was just, and what's remarkable is how little energy the brain actually uses compared to, a corresponding computer system.
Oh, yeah. So feed a teenager one hamburger, it can outperform, at least for some tasks, a computer that's using millions of kilowatts.
Yeah.
So,
but the oxygen demand of the brain is huge.
Yes.
Right. To your point earlier, right? And, you are radiating quite a bit of heat.
Yes.
That has to go somewhere.
So all of us humans are hotheads, right?
Yeah, there we go. There we go. So anyway, this is, again, providing just additional scientific evidence that human beings really are unique and exceptional. And I think it's interesting how the two discoveries tie together, that, if we really are made in God's image to be in a special relationship with God, then wouldn't we expect God to take enormous amount of time to prepare a just right place for us? But
especially when you see the extreme limits. I mean, you really couldn't make our brain any more capable than it really is. It's at the very limit that the physics will permit. And so that requires someone who's got the knowledge to be able to push it to that limit. Just like in the discovery I talked about, trying to get everything there that fast. It's at the very limit of what's possible.
Yeah.
So those are all signatures of the handiwork of God.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Thanks, Fuzz.
Yeah. And thank you for watching today's episode of Star Cells and God. We would really love for you to take part in the discussion about today's program. So use the comment section and let us know what you think and what your thoughts are about the two discoveries that we presented. And then also make sure that you go to our YouTube channel and subscribe and use the notification button so you're alerted when new episodes of Star Cells and God drops, which is every Wednesday. And also make sure you gain access to Star Cells and God through your favorite podcast app. And make sure that you share this video with a friend. And remember, the more that we know about science, the more that we have reasons to believe in the triune God of the Bible.